Okay, there we go.
Hi, beekeepers. How are you? Welcome to our next in a series of Women Building New Foundations. Today we have with us Fern from Wise Stars Apothecary. Welcome, Fern.
Hi, Keith, thank you for having me. I almost called you
Thank you
Keith.
for joining us. So today I would love if you are willing to just share with us a little bit about what Wise Stars Apothecary does and how you are able to create such beautiful congruence with nature.
Oh, thank you, Keith. So, Wise Stars Apothecary is a blend of my astrological work and also my work as an herbalist. And so it depends on who I'm working with, but some clients I just do astrological work with, but I always infuse it with a little bit of flower essence therapy or suggestions about herbs that people might take to help with their astrological transits. But then I also offer sessions where I combine the two modalities, astrology and herbal medicine.
Wonderful. And I've noticed some of these transitions, not being an astrologer, but all of these planetary movements have been disruptive for many of us. And I wonder if you could sort of share what's going on in our universe and our little planet.
Yeah, so over the last few years, we've had a series of transits that, historically speaking, we had them at separate times during the American Revolution, the Great Depression, World War II, the Civil Rights Movement in the 1960s, all the upheaval at that time. So basically, we've had a return of many of these transits, but all at once. So rather
Wow.
than being spread out. So yeah, definitely intense times, lots of changes.
Yeah, so I also want to find out your website and how do people get a hold of you. So let's make sure that you mention that, or we could put it in the chat, but I want to make sure that people know how to get a hold of you.
Sure.
And my question would be if I have my chart read and there's some influences maybe that are coming up and I'm thinking about changing a job, would astrology help me understand sort of maybe I could delay it 10 days or do it earlier, or is it a good time? Is that how it works?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very much a proponent and an advocate of a balance between fate and free will in the way that I work with astrology. So I really like to empower the people that I work with to feel like they have choice, to help them feel that they have the power. And so I don't come at it from the perspective of, the planets are doing this to you, or you only can do it at this time, otherwise it's all going to be a disaster. It's really not how I work, but I do like to definitely, when I do a session with a client, to give them sort of a range of time and describe the different influences around their chart during those times, and then they can use that information to make the best decision for them.
It's so curious. In our collective, we work, as elements of nature, of this planet, as a part of Earth. And it's so curious that, in our galaxy and the universe, there are these moving parts that have impact on us. And I wonder if you can tell me more about how your flower remedies and herbs support those influences we may feel just being part of this planet.
Yeah, so I love that question. And I love having this conversation with you because so much of my inspiration comes from nature and relationship with nature. And I feel that that one of the sort of main quotes that many astrologers sort of base their work in is as above, so below. So I really do believe that there's a connection between the heavens and, the earth. And so the flower essences to me kind of help to ground and bring all that kind of cosmic star, galaxy power, bring it down into the body and help develop a deeper connection with the healing potential of the earth, our relationship with the earth, which is so intimate. And we've I think in the modern era kind of gotten separate from that. So I think the flower essences and the herbs really help heal that disconnection.
So I wonder, yeah, it's so fascinating to me because sometimes I feel very grounded, very connected to the earth. I have my love of honeybees, of course, and the mathematical sequencing. And I do sort of feel like today, for example, is a full moon, and I feel this, there's so much energy. And it doesn't feel like it's inside of my body. Now, is that something that you could sort of see in a chart and then let people know there's a lot of energy coming? So we want to use the flower remedies. I want to make sure I'm understanding the process correctly.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it, you know, many people are finding ways to sort of realign themselves with the cycles of nature. And that's not always possible just in the daily kind of hustle and bustle of our modern life. Ideally on a day like today with it's a very powerful, intense full moon, there would be time to just tune in and kind of process it and be with it. But realistically speaking, that's not always possible. So there are, yes, a number of flower essences, and as well as herbs, like today, we've got this full moon in Capricorn, and it's in a very strong relationship with the planet Pluto, which is a planet of deep change and transformation and intensity, but also power. Pluto is the planet of death and rebirth. And so I think just even, for some people, it's a very conscious process, but for other people, it may even just be unconscious that we're in this kind of time span today where we're recognizing some of the enormous, impact of some of the systemic collective changes we've been going through. So we're kind of, today's the day where we're taking that in and processing it. So herbal support in terms of nervines, which are really soothing to the nerves, milky oats, passion flower, skullcap, all of those, kava is another nice one. Those can just kind of help smooth everything down. And flower essences, of course, the 5-flower remedy by California Flower Essences company is FES, I think is that's just a really good one for feeling that intensity and help process it and calm it down.
So I'm curious too, since you're so connected to nature, and I'm fascinated with our relational fields. So being a somatic person, a body worker for a long time, when we have skin to skin contact or we're sitting in sangha and meditating together, this sort of collective rising of energy that's coming up, and it happens in our beekeeper meditations. We sit together and I may be feeling everything's lovely, and there's a sensation of sort of getting stuck somewhere, and then the collective diffuses it. And I'm curious if that's something that happens out in the galaxy or it happens on Earth, or how does that resonate at all with you, that question, the relational field as we're evolving? It seems to be many more people are more sensitive to those around them.
Yeah, so I guess how I could explain that just from an astrological perspective is that we've been in a multi-year transit of Neptune moving through Pisces. And Neptune is the planet of, the god of the ocean, think of Neptune with the trident, and so it's how we're all connected. It is that kind of sense of we're all one, and so what affects one person affects the other person. And Neptune is ruled by the sign of Pisces. So in the transit we've been having, it's been in Pisces for a number of years, probably at least 7, and we're going to be experiencing it for several more years. So I think that transit in particular has really sensitized a larger group of people, and kind of opened up our receptivity to spiritual, psychic kind of influences. The last time that we had this transit was during what they call the Romantic era in Europe, and so there was a similar kind of greater attunement to nature and art and all that kind of thing. Yeah.
So there's not like a beauty. We're looking for the goodness. It's curious that so many things are happening in the world, and yet I see so many helpers, so many people doing so much self work and really being so courageous and brave and facing, patterns that they learned somewhere or inherited somewhere. And I'm curious if those more powerful inherited kind of patterns, can those be supported with herbs and flower remedies?
I think so. One flower essence, because as you know, I do in my astrological and herbal practice, I do a lot of work with ancestral healing, which is something that's very close to my heart. And that has been, especially in the last 6 months, that's something I've been getting. There's been a bigger and bigger demand for my ancestral astrology session. And one of the flower essences that I've been working with lately and encouraging my clients to use is Joshua tree. And one of the really spectacular things about that is that the ancestral healing practitioner that I worked with for several years, her name is Jessica Healy, and she's wonderful. She actually grew up, and I think she's 2nd or 3rd generation, I don't know what to say, resident of Joshua tree. That's,
Wow.
yeah. And so when I realized that the Joshua tree flower essence was specifically for healing ancestral generational patterns, I reached out to her and I was like, Jessica, are you aware of this connection? And she was really blown away. So that's been a really lovely kind of affirmation of working with the flower essences and the ancestral astrology and all that connection.
Wonderful. And I would love to invite you, if you're willing, to share a little bit more about your exploration and how ancestral astrology works, and what would a session look like maybe?
Sure, yeah. So this is not a new concept. Astrologers have been doing ancestral work with astrological charts, forever. It's probably one of the first areas that I delved into as an astrologer and I think many astrologers, because you start to explore your own chart and then you're kind of like, well, what about my mom? What about my dad? What about my brother and my sister? And the ancestral astrology, basically in a session, I have a client gather together as many of their family's charts as they have access to. So it can be a complete, birth time, date, place, but we can also gather a lot of information just from the birth date, the month, the day, the year. And I kind of lay those all out, all of the charts, and then I look for patterns. You see sometimes the same sign running through a lineage. Sometimes you see just an element, earth, air, fire, water is really strong. You could see a planet that just keeps popping up, the ruling planet of a chart. Venus is really strong in my ancestral line, but it's basically an expansion of the pattern kind of hunting that we do as astrologers. And many fields do pattern hunting, but I love to look for those patterns in the ancestral sort of weave. Yeah.
So I love that you talk about patterns, loving all of the all of the patterns in this universe. And nature, we love spirals so much. They're everywhere. I'm curious if a planet were to show up throughout a family lineage, what kind of indicator could that be?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different layers to sort of explore how a pattern influences a family line. But I almost see that if that is one of the signatures of a family line, it's almost like that planet is both a I don't want to overuse the word energy, but it's like an influence of an energetic that family is working with, is learning how to relate to, both I think in positive ways and also challenging ways. So, just using Venus as an example, a lot of folks will, when they look at Venus, it's like, oh, Venus is all good, love, relationship, money, beauty, art. Oh, what could be wrong with that, right? But every planet, just like every person and every situation has a shadow side. And so the shadow side of Venus, there can be uh, just sort of a shallow approach to life, not really wanting to dive beneath the surface, but just to keep things on the surface. And, let's just focus on how it looks, let's make sure everything looks beautiful and pretty, but what's going on underneath, right? Where's the depth? Where's the roots? Where's the intensity? There can be sort of a laziness with a strong Venus kind of influence of, let's just kind of enjoy the moment and not really get anything done, but let's just, kind of push things off. So I bring that up just because no matter what planet you might have influencing your family line, there's going to be a positive side of it and there's going to be a challenging side of it. So it's something to just learn about, explore, work with, notice how it shows up in your life, in your family's life, that kind of thing.
And so it sounds like working with the patterns of inherited family may offer greater insights into ourselves and our own shadow self, and offer those places. We talk about the places that are yet untouched by our own loving kindness.
Yes, absolutely. And also I think it helps to realize that you're not in it alone. That there's, you have a little piece, but sometimes I think when we're unconscious or unaware of the family pattern, that it feels like we've got to do it all by ourselves and that it's all ours to fix. And then when we realize, no, this is like a centuries old, who knows how long it goes back, and you've got your piece in it and you can do what you can with that, but it's not all yours to fix. And maybe it doesn't even need to be fixed, really. Maybe it just needs to be looked at from a different perspective, and as you said, some loving kindness directed at it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I love how you said that we feel that sense of aloneness. I think a lot of what I've been hearing since the pandemic has been this, but I came to fix these situations. And the reality of living on the continuum, we'll go as far as we can with it. But as you brought into this, our field, this pattern may have been in existence for 100, 200 years longer. We don't really know. And so having a little bit of softness when we encounter maybe these shadow sides, like you brought up with Venus, right? Maybe I have a tendency to be a little lazy and watch Netflix all day or whatever it is. That's just the other side of an aspect of one aspect of us.
Yeah, I really like how you put that. It's not some of these things are so much bigger and older, and you know, just as individuals, we can't do it all by ourselves. And so calling in ancestral support, from our loving, compassionate ancestors, calling in divine support, that I think can really give us much more power and reach than we might have if we try to do it all by ourselves.
Yeah, I really like that. And I'm so curious too, have you found when people investigate their patterns that they may feel the support of their ancestral lineage in making the change, perhaps to make a little bit more of a hole in the pattern, so to speak?
Yeah, I think there is my particular sort of inclination is to, I've approached the ancestral healing work with a very, how do I put it, a very specific process that's based on the work of Daniel Four of ancestral medicine. And I,
It's wonderful. That book is wonderful.
yes, yeah, that was just um, finding that process and moving through it has been so healing for me personally, and I have received so much benefit from that. Um, and I feel that there is something to doing a process that is grounded, focused, has boundaries, has some steps that you have to commit to and put some time and practice into. It's a Saturn approach, just to put it in astrological terms. There's a sense of dedication and commitment to it. And the more that you put into it, the more you get out of it. So I think you can do, just a open-hearted call, to your well ancestors, please support me. I think that's wonderful to do. And I think if you do a longer, more committed practice, that you will also get, much more benefit out of it as well.
It's so curious that you say that. I have, I call it my ancestral wall. It is my, grandparents, and I have their photographs just on a place, and I have my little flowers, and I light my candle, and I wonder if, that's just bringing the flowers is my way of bringing earth, that they were here, that I acknowledge that I would not be here without their intention to bring me here. And so I find that so curious about the patterns, because I've never thought about what's actually run through these. What did it take to bring them here? And what happened 1,000 years ago? How did we get here? It's so interesting.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. I love that. And I think when you start to investigate and explore your family lineage, and especially bringing the astrology into it, you start to really get a sense of the sort of essence of your lineage. And there's more than one lineage, right? But one lineage could really bring in, bears, for example. Another lineage could really bring in bees and honey. But you start to see how these sort of elements of nature really shape, your relationship with the earth and with being alive. And yeah, there's so much richness in that investigation.
Yeah, and that being alive, it's so nice to be connected. And I find your mention of the flower remedies and the herbs, I find, I never really feel alone because there's so much nature and there's so many little elementals part of nature that are so supportive. And so when we get into these powerful mental formations of isolation, I have to do it alone, there's this sense of disconnection from your heart. And and I'm curious, you had mentioned a Saturnian way of doing things. Now, from an astrological point, does each planet then have like sort of a rule book?
Yeah, that's great. I love what you said. I love what you said about that connection and disconnection. I think that's so relevant and important, just as a theme or topic in our current era, that there's so many people who do feel disconnected, and that nature is like the ultimate connector, it's the ultimate relationship. So I just want to acknowledge that, because I think that's really beautifully put, what you said. And then as far as planetary rule book, I think Saturn, if any planet I would say has a rule book. Saturn is the planet of rule. There was a funny line in what was it, Pirates of the Caribbean, where Johnny Depp he was, the pirate. He said, we don't, as pirates, we don't have rules, we have guidelines, And so I think the other planets, they do have some sort of operating instructions that when you participate or have a relationship with them in the way that their nature is best expressed, that you kind of develop a partnership. You're connecting to that planet. And everyone is very different. Saturn is very much about, Saturn's a planet with a ring around it. So it has to do with how we work within form and structure in the material world. Whereas Uranus is all about kind of blowing things up, like, doing things differently, doing things in ways that we've never even imagined before. It's the planet of invention and sort of ingenuity. So every planet's got its signature, its essence, its guidelines, so to speak.
Yeah, guidelines. It's so interesting. It's kind of illustrative of the complexity of human beings. To me, we are so multifaceted and layered, and how I often hear sometimes I feel more anxious when I'm with my family than I do with my friends. And I think, I wonder what that is. And I wonder if it isn't something, a planetary influence or a pattern, maybe from the family that isn't engaged, that hasn't yet found its rightful place. It needs tending, right?
Yeah, and I love that.
Yeah. So much tending.
Yeah, now that's interesting you say that, so much tending. I is thinking a lot about the concept of maintenance and this sort of spiritual practice of maintenance, and just kind of in the chart, it has to do with Virgo in the 6th house, and how there's so much beauty to tending and maintenance if we can perceive it that way. Otherwise it can feel like obligation or duty or drudgery, so it's just how do we approach it, kind of thing.
How do we approach it? It's such a good, and I love this. You said as above, so below, and I find that there's this galactic influence that perhaps is activating to our genetic heritage or our lived experiences, and then there's this ability of earth. We have our soles of our feet are kissed by the earth, as the venerable Thich Nhat Hanh would say, and we can walk and be connected, and we're never really alone. And yet, we have these influences that need tending. And just like you're saying, it doesn't feel so much like drudgery if we can. In the very beginning, when you said there isn't time, it is maintenance. I feel like what you're saying, we require a certain amount of time to tend and maintain the self.
Mhm. Yeah, that's an ascent. I mean, it's part of, there's 12 signs, 12 houses, and we leave one of those areas of life out, or one of those very important elements,
Yeah.
we're not getting the full human experience. And so one of the slices of pie, one of the houses, one of the signs has to do with that kind of earthy practice of taking care of the body, taking care of our daily routine, and maintaining those so that life can go on.
Yes, and I also want to ask a very interesting question that's come up lately. There are some in the collective that are very focused on others' needs and put themselves last. And I in compassion practice and loving kindness, you are included. Every being is included, not everyone else and then you. It's all of us. And so I'm curious if that doesn't show up as a pattern specifically, or it's just what's happening in the universe.
Yeah, I think there's many levels, I think there's definitely an astrological influence. Just going back to that ancestral astrology piece, there is a thread, there's a signature that's around caretaking and nurturing life. And it can be very beautiful and very, it's necessary. If we don't have that kind of, mothering, nurturing, call it Cancerian. Right now we're in Cancer season. Today's the full moon in Cancer, Capricorn, but the sun is in Cancer, moon in Capricorn. And so it's absolutely essential, but like any sign, any quality, the shadow side of it is to over caretake, to be compulsive about it, to kind of step over the boundary of another person and try to fix things for them, because there's that sort of, if I can fix things for them, I can fix things for myself. That kind of codependency piece,
Yeah.
um, and healers particularly feel that they are trained, maybe from a young age, to be aware of where other people's needs are. And so it becomes almost an unconscious, uncontrollable compulsion that can be very detrimental to both parties involved. And I think if you bring in the Capricorn, ruled by Saturn, boundaries, limits, structure, sustainability, kind of long-term planning, that helps to balance it. The integration of those are necessary. It's like the father archetype, the mother archetype, right?
That makes so much sense. And it's so curious. This image just came to mind as you were talking of, your bare feet on the green grass and all of these flowers and trees, and the planets and the stars were all kind of moving. It was quite beautiful. And I thought there's so much spaciousness in what you say, that the more we tend through this kind of awareness of, oh, there's a pattern, oh, there's an influence, and all these houses and all of these planetary influences are cared for, that you're sort of standing in the middle of a wheel,
Mm,
is what it looks like.
absolutely, absolutely. And that's you know, many great thinkers, great spiritual teachers have worked with the concept of a mandala. It's a very
Mm.
old, ancient tradition. And it's not one that I have a whole lot of familiarity with beyond the astrological chart. But the astrological chart is basically our own unique personal mandala of life, and it has our energy signature in it. It's like, to me, it's like a fingerprint. It's so unique that it will never be exactly replicated, So yes, how do we become aware of our own mandala and celebrate it? Yeah,
Yeah. And make time and space for it, it sounds like.
absolutely, absolutely. Yes, the spaciousness.
So tell me, your website, how would it work if someone from our collective would like to reach out to you? Do you want them to email us and we send it to you, or do you want to name your website? We'll put it in our comments. How should we find you?
Okay, sure. Yeah, no. Any way is fine, really. You know, email is fine. My website is ystarsastrology.com. I actually have two. They all go to the same place. It's also ystarsapothecary.com. I used
Okay.
to make herbal products and flower remedies, but since I've, you know, resettled to a new state, and there's been a lot of transition, I have put that on hold. So now I'm mostly doing consultation.
And it sounds like a lot of people are searching for their ancestral patterns from what you've said. Yeah, we're all reaching into the past to make it the present and make a better future.
Yes, it's been really a fascinating process over the last 6 months to a year to just feel the interest in that and respond to it. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so Y stars
Astrology.
astrology.com, no hyphen, just ystarsastrology.com
Yes, and
or ystarsapothecary.com.
that's right. And I'll put it in the comments too, or the chat.
Right. And what would happen if someone, let's say, doesn't have a birth certificate or maybe they only know the date but not the time or the location? Could you still find out some information from them?
Yeah, I can. Ideally, there would be some time spent to look for as close to a birth time as they can get. If you're doing an ancestral astrology session, it helps to have the main person who's asking. It definitely helps to have their birth time, but when you go further back, you don't necessarily need all that information. I have done sessions without a birth time though, and there is a lot of information that can be gathered. But to find your birth time, it's definitely worth a look. So you can call the hospital where you were born and ask for the long form birth certificate. That usually includes the birth time, particularly people who were born after 1968, 69. Usually it's almost always included, especially in the United States.
Wonderful. And if someone was adopted, for example, will in their ancestral chart, will the biological family's patterns show up so that they sort of have some guidance into maybe what they came to awaken in themselves?
Yeah, I think that's a really wonderful question. And in the, I taught an ancestral astrology class last fall, and we talked about that because I think it's you know, really an important question to be addressed. And what I have found with adoptees is most of the adoptees I've worked with have had some access to both. And I think it's worthwhile to look at both. But if you only have access to your adopted parents, I think I've found it's very interesting to see how the patterns overlap. You see a resonance in the individual's chart and in the adopted parent's chart. So it's like there's a reason why those people came together. You can see it in the chart. It's fascinating.
Someone wants to bring their family members, let's say the family wants to do, they would each come and they can book with you on the website to do like a family consult to review it. And also tell me a little bit about your courses that you offer, because I know you have several trainings, being quite busy, so there may be people that would like to participate.
Sure. Yeah. So the main thing that I do ongoing is my astrology salon, and that's a really accessible way to start to work with me. It's $17 a month, and that includes 2 meetings. We have 2 astrology salons a month, and you don't need to have any astrological knowledge. And so that's you know, you can cancel at any time. And so that's a great way to just kind of start if you're curious. And then I teach a beginning astrology class. This year I only did it once, but I'm hoping to try to do it twice a year. And then I do the astrological or ancestral astrology course, which I believe I will do again this fall. And then every once in a while,
Okay.
just if I get inspired to teach something, I'll have that. And I usually share that on my newsletter, which you can sign up for on my website. Also, of course, social media, Instagram, all that kind of thing. Trying to kind of move out of that area because there's, so many challenges. But I do try to get the word out about the different courses I teach in a lot of different areas.
Perfect. But you do have a mailing list, so people could
Yeah.
subscribe and then be notified maybe next month when the salon is happening, so they could put it on their calendar. Okay, perfect.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for
All right.
asking. Keith.
Yes, of course. Anything else you would like to share?
Yeah, I don't think so. I guess the final thing is one thing I'm going to be talking about in upcoming astrology salons more is a current transit we're in is a country in the United States, which is the Pluto return, and we're kind of in the middle of that process. There's some transits coming up at the end of the month, beginning of August, that I'll be talking about as well, because there's a lot of transitions, a lot of shifts that we are experiencing collectively, particularly in the United States, but also globally. So I will be sharing about those more in the coming months.
Wonderful. I always think of Pluto as that small but mighty.
Yeah, it's totally. Yeah, it got quite a punch.
Hold on, wear your seatbelt.
Exactly.
Yes. Well, Fern, thank you so much. I've so much enjoyed our time together today, and I
I do too.
appreciate your being with us. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Kate. It was wonderful to talk with you.
You too.